So yesterday, my wife and I decided to take a trip to Austin because I wanted to test out the time-lapse features in the new a7S III. And I thought the results were pretty good. Hello to anyone who might be watching this video. My name is Donovan and I love filmmaking. So I wanted to make a quick video about how I was able to get those time lapses and kind of make a tutorial on how you could do the same. Based on a quick Google search, apparently any Sony camera later than the 6400, the a6400, has a interval shooting feature. It being interval shooting, I was taking raw photos every so often and then I stitched it all together into a video. So let's start with the camera settings. So I'm going to go into my menu here and you'll see that on the shooting mode, the photo shooting mode, I just go to down here to drive mode, number 5, and then I go to interval shooting, and you have to toggle interval shooting on. And then I have it set to a 5-second delay or a shooting start time. That's just so I can, when I push the button, any vibrations or anything like that can be mitigated from when you first start the time lapse. Shooting interval is just the space in between every single photo that it takes. Now, just a side note here, shooting interval will kind of have a minimum threshold of your shutter speed. So for example, if you have a shutter speed of 3 seconds, but you set your shooting interval to 1 second, then it'll still take a picture every, it'll wait for 1 second, or it'll have an interval of 1 second every 3 seconds, because it still has to wait for the shutter to open and close to be able to take the photo. So that's just something to bear in mind. But for the city skyline, I used shooting interval every 3 seconds. So you can see here, you can change it to up to 60 seconds, but I did every 3 seconds. And the reason why I did that is because I needed to have the passage of time go by more quickly so that I could show the clouds and everything moving past, just to show more motion. I feel like with time lapses, you want to show a lot of motion. And to get that with this cityscape, the water was relatively boring in regards to motion because I had to actually have, I forgot my ND filter, so I couldn't set my shutter speed super low, so I couldn't get that motion blur in the water. So I decided to go every 3 seconds, get more motion in the clouds, that sort of thing. But once we went into the city, I decided to set my interval shooting to 1 second, because I knew that I was going to be, I have an 18mm on here on my camera, and I knew that I was going to be going wide, just like I did for this one. And going wide, well, you saw in the video, I was able to capture the skyscrapers and some of the taller buildings, but I was also able to capture some of the movement of the people and the buses and vehicles that drove past on the road. So with that being said, here's what I did after I got all of the photos. For each one, I took probably, so for the one of Austin from start to finish, I think I took a total of around, I want to say 1,300 photos or something like that. And then for the ones after that, I did about, I think it was between 300 and 400 per time lapse. So once you have all of the photos from your time lapse, all I really did was bring it into a photo editor. So in this case, you can bring it into something like Lightroom. And the way that I edit these is actually really fast. It's really simple, and I'll show you real quick. So what I did is I opened all of the images, and I selected the first one here, went into film strip mode or detail mode, and from here I just made some minor adjustments to exposure and that sort of thing. Maybe, you know, you can even up the vibrance a little bit if you want, but I didn't do a whole lot to it. Maybe some color mixing, that sort of thing. And then once you have it adjusted to your first one, just do Control-C to copy your settings, and then open up into the grid mode, scroll down to the bottom, hold Shift to select all your images when you select the bottom one, and then do Control-V or paste. And then it will paste those settings onto all of your images. And of course, you can see up at the top, there is a progress bar showing that is applying to all those images. So once you've edited your photos and exported them using Lightroom, your photo editor of choice, just make sure that you rename the images in a sequence. Now your camera should already name them have them named in a sequence anyway, but if first, let's say that the image number in the camera is close to hitting the 9,999 and then it resets down back to the first one, that just means that partway through your time lapse, once you bring it into DaVinci Resolve, then you'll have to cut it and then move it from the front to the back. But other than that, it should just kind of, you know, keep its sequence numbers. So once I've exported those, you put them all in their own folder, and what that does is that allows DaVinci Resolve to read them as a sequence of images and put them together into a video. So that's what's been done here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new timeline, and for this timeline I'm just going to set it to 4K, create, and I'm going to drag this onto there. And as you can see, photos are taken in 4:3, so I have black bars on the edges, so we'll get rid of that. But what I'll do for this is I'll actually just pick and choose this time lapse here, and I'll just go through until I can find there. That is about where it starts and stops, right there. So I'll do that, click B on my keyboard to bring up the slice or blade edit tool, and then A for selection. Remove the first part on there, and there we have it. Now I'm going to kind of pick and choose how I want to scale it. So if you hold Alt, then you can do micro adjustments. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to scale it until it hits the edges. And then I'm also going to move it up because I want to show more of the street rather than the sky, because the street's what was really interesting in this time lapse because of all of the traffic going through and the light trails. So then I can hit play, and it's just cycling through all of those images. You can see here it's 0 through whatever .jpeg. It's not even necessarily a video file, but Resolve is just treating it as a video file. So see, that's playing through nicely. The last thing I like to do, kind of a finishing touch to a time lapse, is to add dynamic zoom. This is one of my favorite features in DaVinci Resolve because you just click dynamic zoom, and then you come over here and you switch over to the dynamic zoom editor, and then it shows you the two boxes. So green is for start and red is for stop. And what you can do here is you can swap them. But I like to have it so that it's zoomed in and it zooms out as it goes. And I'm going to click and drag the corner of this so that it's just zooming out a little bit. So once I have that dynamic zoom set to how I want it, then I will deselect this. So either click on it, or you can just go back to transform and then declick it, unselect it I should say. And then now when I go to the start of the time lapse, you can see here that it slowly zooms out. Now, and that even might be just a little too slow. So the cool thing about dynamic zoom is you can actually take some off the back and some off the front, like that, and then it will automatically adjust for that. So now you can see that it's actually zooming out just a little bit faster. So that's pretty much it when it comes to creating a time lapse using a7S III and DaVinci Resolve. My opinion, it's really easy to do. You can just turn on the interval shooting inside the a7S III, go to manual on your photo mode. Oh, and I actually forgot to mention this. You'll want to set your photo settings before you turn on interval shooting. It's just easier that way. Because I think there are some things that you can't change once you're in interval shooting. So I set all my settings and then turn interval shooting on and then just start it. And it's a really easy thing to do. Just slap a tripod down and hang out for, 20-30 minutes in a spot to get some really cool time lapse. I think time lapses are really useful to put into your video. And that's something that I'm going to start using more because it's so easy to do on the a7S III, especially where it's a time lapse using raw photos. So you can get that super high quality, high dynamic range time lapse video, and you can use, Lightroom's denoising processors and sharpening and colors, and then bring that into your video editing of choice. And you don't have to deal with like the S&Q mode, which is okay, but the S&Q mode, I did a time lapse the other day with the S&Q mode and it wasn't nearly as good. I didn't have as much flexibility with the colors despite the 10-bit color and everything like that. The raw photo is just better for time lapsing. So there you have it. If you enjoy watching content like this, feel free to subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Share this with anybody who you think might enjoy it as well. And I will see you in the next video.